Hello everybody, so welcome to this Bouzouki tutorial. This is the first one of these I'm going to be doing. May do some more, we'll wait and see. That all depends on how this goes and what you guys think. So for those of you tuning in, thanks for coming. First of all, just to get it out of the way, you're probably looking at this going, hold on a minute, I've tuned in for a Bouzouki tutorial and he's holding a guitar. Well, this is actually a Bouzouki disguised as a guitar. Okay. So you'll notice it does have 8 strings, all grouped in pairs, but it does have a guitar body. I play this simply because I much prefer the sound of the guitar body. It's a much sort of deeper, richer sound, you get a much richer tone. So that's why I play the guitar Bouzouki. The ones that you will probably be most familiar with, those of you that have Bouzoukis or ever played one, will look something like this. This is a Portuguese Bouzouki, but it's based on the Irish Bouzouki, which is what we're going to be learning today, what I'm going to be teaching you how to play. So this lesson is primarily for people who have never played Bouzouki before, who are complete beginners, or people who've maybe started playing, or people who maybe want to play and just want to get a feel for what the instrument's like, how it sounds, that sort of thing. So yeah, hopefully you'll find it useful. So I thought we'd start with just a little bit of a history on the Bouzouki, the instrument itself. So the instrument, the Bouzouki, actually, as it sort of is today, originates in Greece. And it was brought over to Greece by Greek immigrants from Turkey around the sort of late 1900s. There's a lot of people think this instrument, the Bouzouki, is a lot older than that. It's actually not. It's a sort of very early 20th century instrument. And it was introduced to Greece around the sort of early 1900s. And originally it was a 6-string instrument with the strings all arranged in pairs. So what that means is when you play the instrument, you play 2 strings at once, much like a 12-string guitar, if any of you have ever played a 12-string guitar. Okay? So it was a 6-string instrument to start with, and it was that sort of teardrop shape, and it had a nice bold back, and I think the tuning was something like DAD or something like that. And it was used quite a lot in a lot of Greek traditional kind of folk music. And then in the sort of 1950s, it was brought over to Ireland and started being used in Irish folk music. And when it came to Ireland, they changed the instrument slightly. They flattened the back. At some point, there was a fourth pair of strings added to the instrument, so it then became an 8-string instrument. And what they also did is they changed the tuning. So it went from being the Greek tuning, which I think was C, F, A, D. They changed it, the Irish changed it to G, D, A, D. And that's the tuning that we're going to be using today. So the top chorus of strings is your G. The second is your D. Then you've got A. Yeah. And then you've got D. G, D, A, D. And the reason they use that tuning is because a lot of Irish music is written in the key of D. And that makes it very easy to play in that key if you have that tuning. There's also a lot of different variations you can have on different chords, which is what I'm going to show you as part of this lesson. You can play in other keys, and of course we have the ability to use capos as well if we need to change the keys, but the instrument really sort of works very well in that key and sort of relative keys to that. So that's a bit of history about the instrument itself. So, what I'm going to start with is just to teach you some basic chords for the key of D, and then I'm going to show you some different ways of playing those chords up and down the fretboard, and then just sort of practice putting those chords together, and then, we'll see how we go. So we're going to start with a very, very basic D chord. So for those of you that never played any kind of instrument before, you'll hear me refer to frets. So frets are these little markings here that sort of separate the different notes. And they go all the way up. So you've got 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd, 4th, etc., etc., going right up. the scale. So if you, for example, if I say put your finger on the 2nd fret, what I mean is I want you to put your finger in this space between those 2 frets there. 3rd fret will be the space between those 2 frets there, and so on. Okay. And for the purpose of the fingers, so 1st finger, 2nd finger, 3rd finger, little finger or pinky. Okay. So we'll start with the first chord, D. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to place our 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the top string, top pair of strings. That's the G string here. Okay. And we're just going to play all the strings there. Okay. And that gives us a very simple D chord. Now that's actually a D modal chord, okay, and what that means is that you can play that chord in either the major or the minor key. So those of you who know a little bit about music will know that you have major keys, which tend to be a bit happier sounding, and the minor keys, which tend to be quite sad. This actually can be played for either of those keys, and you'll find particularly with a lot of Irish music, and sometimes you find it in English music as well, but not quite so much. But a lot of those sort of Irish tunes, they will flip between major and minor keys, like halfway through the song. So to avoid kind of getting caught out by that, that's quite a useful chord, because it means if the key does change from major to minor, your chord will still work. And the notes that you've got there, you've got that note there is A, you've got D, A, D. So it's just the first and the 5th note of that scale. Okay? So that's your D. Then we're going to show you a G chord. It's another very simple chord. You'll find a lot of those chords in the bouzouki you can play with sort of 1 or 2 or 3 fingers quite easily. And this is another 1-finger wonder. This is a G chord. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to, again, take our 1st finger and we're going to place it on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string down, which is the A string there. Okay, and that gives us a G major chord. Okay. So that's the major chord, that's the happy chord. And then finally, the next chord I'm going to teach you is an A chord. Okay. Now this one's a bit more tricky. You need 3 fingers for this one. So for the A chord, what you're going to do is you're going to take your 1st finger and you're going to put it on the 2nd fret of the G string up here. Your 2nd finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the D string, so they're going to have one on top of the other like that. And then your 3rd finger is going to come down to the very bottom string, the D string, and also play the 2nd fret. Okay, so the A string you leave open. All right, so you're not fretting the A string, but you're fretting the other 3, and that gives you an A chord. Now again, that's an A modal chord, so that will work in either major or minor. Okay, because it's only using the 1st and 5th notes of the scale. All right? So we've got D modal, D, G, A, D. So if you're very new to this, what I suggest you do now, maybe if you want to pause the video, you can just practice changing between those 3 chords. So starting with the G, sorry, starting with the D rather. I'm just playing a very simple 4/4 rhythm there. Obviously you play whatever rhythm you like, but yeah, we'll just keep it in 4/4 for the time being. Okay, so that's nice and simple D, G and A chord. Alright. Now, practice that, and then what I'm going to do now is just show you how to play the chords in the D major scale. Okay, so you can use all of those chords in the D major scale, but if we want to actually play a D major, because what we're playing at the moment is the D modal, as I said, which is neither major nor minor. But if we want to play a D major chord, what we've got to do here, we're going to add an extra note in there. Okay, so we're going to take our 3rd finger and we're going to place it on the 4th fret of the D string, so there. Okay, if you can all see that. Hope that makes sense. Okay, and that will give us D major. Notice it sounds a little brighter, a little happier. That's a D major. So if you know you're playing in D major scale and you're going to stay there and you want the chord to sort of fit and sound a little bit sort of happy, a little bit more in tune with the feel of the song, then you can add that fourth finger in and get yourself a nice D major. Okay. So that's a D major. You can then go to G. Now that's already a G major chord. All right, so that will work in G major, of course in D major, and sound all right. But if you want to make that sound a little bit nicer or a little bit more varied, perhaps a little bit brighter, what you can do is you can take your pinky, your little finger here, put it on the 5th fret of the D string. Okay, so you're playing the 2nd fret of the A string with your first finger, and then the 5th fret of the D string with your little finger. Okay. Notice that sounds a little bit brighter because it's got that top note there. Okay, so you got. Okay, so we can go from D major. So those chords sound a little bit more sort of in fitting with the key. Okay. So practice again, changing between those two. Okay. I want to show you something now that's a little bit more tricky. So of course we've got our A chord, which is here. Now this is an A modal, as we've said. If we wanted to make it an A major, okay, so it fits in with that key and sounds a little bit more. Sort of in fitting with the feel of the song. In order to get an A major down here, we have to play a bar chord. Okay. Now, if you're a guitar player, you're probably used to playing bar chords. Personally, I hate bar chords. I struggle with them a lot. I don't like playing them. But again, on the bouzouki, you can play bar chords, and they're fairly simple most of the time. And the good thing about the bouzouki, much like the guitar, is there are a couple of different ways you can do them. All right. So I'm going to show you one way of doing it, or a couple of ways of doing it. All right. So to get our A major chord, we're going to play a bar chord. All right. So we're going to take our first finger, and we're going to place it across all of the strings on the 2nd fret. Okay. So just there. All right. Push down nice and hard. Okay. Because you've got 8 strings to hold down. All right. Then you're going to take your 3rd finger, and you're going to place it on the 3rd string down. Okay. So that A string, 3rd string down, on the 4th fret. Okay, so there, you guys can see. All right. And that gives us A major. All right, so that completes our 3 chords, or 3 of the chords from our D major scale. All right, so we've got D major, G major with our pinky on. A major. Okay, a little bit of buzz there, but yeah, won't worry too much about that. So nice D major there, G, and then A. Okay. Now, if you struggle a little bit with with holding your finger down like that, there is another way you can play it. For some people, this will be more tricky. For others, it may be a little bit easier, so you can try this. So what you can do instead is you can make use of your thumb. Okay, so you put your thumb over the top of the 2nd fret to hold the top string down, the G string. 2nd finger goes underneath it. Okay, then you can use, 1st finger rather goes underneath it on the D string. You can use your middle finger on the very top string, the D string. Yeah. And then either with your pinky or your 4th finger, if you can stretch with your 4th finger, you can use I keep saying 4th finger, 3rd finger, your ring finger. You can stretch with your ring finger, you can use that. Otherwise, use your little finger and fret the 4th fret of the A string, so you get that essentially. It's a little bit tricky to change into sort of when you're moving through the chords quickly, but for some people it can be a little bit more comfortable. Yeah. So just to recap that, so it's thumb over the top on the G string, 2nd fret, 1st finger goes onto the 2nd fret of the D string, 3rd finger goes onto the 2nd fret of the top D string, sorry. So when I say top, I mean top as in note, but bottom as in of the guitar, not to confuse anybody. So the D string down here, and then your little finger goes on the 4th fret of the A string. Like that. Alright? So you can try that if you're struggling with doing the bar chord. Okay? So that gives you 3 chords in D major, which you can play either as major chords, or you can just play the nice simple chords like that. Okay, so you've got a couple of different versions you can do. So they will work in the major scale. All right. What I'm going to show you now is I'm just going to show you a couple of different ways, or well, more than a couple actually, a few different ways of playing the different chords, because there's actually a lot of different positions you can play those chords on the bouzouki, and what that enables you to do is it just enables you to get a little bit of a different sound. It can also help if you're weaving in things like counter melodies. Obviously when you sort of learn to play a little bit more, you'll start to weave in counter melodies, or if you want to change sort of, quickly between certain chords, sometimes having different positions on the fretboard can help with that. And it also helps if you are playing a song where it is just those 3 chords over and over again. It gives you a little bit of variation, so you can make things a little bit more interesting. Okay. So I'm going to start with D, because there's lots of different ways of playing D on this instrument. So we've already got that one, and we've got one. I'm using my little finger there, because you can use your 3rd finger. Okay. So if you want to play another D, what you can do is you can go right up to the 7th fret, which is here, and put your finger on the 7th fret of the G string. And again, that's a modal chord, that's a modal D, so that will work in major or minor. Very useful. Another thing you can do if you want to play a D major, okay, so again this is this chord here, this is D major. If you want to change that one, so at the moment with this one we've got our 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the G string and our 3rd finger on the 4th fret of the D string, like that. If we move our 1st finger to where our 3rd finger is, so if we put our 1st finger on the 4th fret of the D string, and then with our pinky we're going to, or a little finger, we're going to put it on the 7th fret of the G string up there. So where we just had our 1st finger a little moment ago, we're now going to put our little finger there. Okay, so you end up with that. Okay. And that gives you a D major. Okay. Alright. So that's another way of playing D majors. You can either play it down here, or you can play it up here. It just gives you that D in the bass note. Okay. So you got there. Another way you can play a D is, which I sometimes like to play if I want to do a little bit of melody over the top, is you can again put your 1st finger on the 4th fret of the bottom string here, so the high D. Put your 1st finger in there, okay. And this time when you strum, don't strum the G string, don't strum the top strings, just strum from the D string down, so the last 3 strings there, okay. And that gives you a D. Okay, it's a very bright D major. This, okay. And the good thing about this is you can, if you want to, you can kind of move up and down the fretboard just on that string. So you can go. Nice to just sort of do a little bit of melody on there. As long as you just play those 3 strings, you can pretty much do whatever you like and it'll sound in tune. One of the good things you'll find about the bouzouki, and one of the things that's quite useful, is that because of the way it's tuned, you can do little things like that and get that nice drone underneath from just sort of striking those 2 strings, or you know, depending on what you're playing, you can sometimes include the bottom string as well, the G string as well. But it enables you to kind of play a melody but still have like a drone underneath, so sometimes it can sound like there's more than one instrument playing, you know. So. So it's very nice like that, and I tend to use that quite a lot when I'm sort of playing different songs. So that's another D you can have. Okay. Let's think, is there any others? Yeah. So the other one I was going to show you is a power chord, but I'm going to leave that for a little moment. I'll show you the power chords later. There is one more, which is the bar chord. So we've got our obviously A bar chord, which we did down here. Okay. Well, if we go up to the 7th fret and we play all of the 7, so put our first finger across the entire set of strings, and then we put our 3rd finger here on the 9th fret of the A string, so the 3rd string down, so there, okay, and we get, and of course if that's more uncomfortable, you can of course play it like this. So that is thumb on the G string, 7th fret, first finger on the D string, 7th fret, 3rd finger on the top D string, 7th fret, and then either your 3rd finger or your pinky, whichever is most comfortable, on the 9th fret of the A string. So that's, you can play that like that or like that, whichever's easier. All right. So that gives you D major in a few different positions. Okay, so just to recap those, we've got down here, 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 here. Okay. So those are a few different places you can play D. All right. There are a few more, but those are probably the most common ones, the ones that sound the nicest. Okay. So you've also got different places you can play the G chord. So of course we know we've got that one there, so with our first finger on the 2nd fret A string, and we know if we add that one, that gives us a nice brighter sounding G. Another place we can play a G chord is here. So what I'm going to get you to do is get your first finger and put it on the 4th fret of the G string, so there. Your 2nd finger is going to go on the 5th fret of the string below, which is the D string. Okay, so you're just going to play those two. Okay, now that is a G chord, but it's more of a suggested G chord. The reason I say suggested is because it does have an A in it, because we're not fretting that string, so that we're leaving that open. Right. Technically shouldn't be there if it's a G chord, right? So you can get away with playing that one, but it's not one that you want to be hanging on for too long, because otherwise it might sound a bit weird. So it's kind of one that I tend to sort of use if I'm passing between chords, so I might play a D. So it can sound nice as a sort of a passing chord, but it's not what I would want to stay on for too long. Particularly if there's someone's playing a melody underneath, because the A string might clash. There is a way of getting around that, and it's very simple. So if you play those two strings there, all you need to do is take your 3rd finger and place it on the 5th fret of the string below. Okay, so you're just trying to get this in front of the camera so you're there. Okay, so you've got those 2 fingers stacked on top of one another. That one goes there on the 4th fret of the top string, and then that then gives you your G major. Okay, so that's a way of getting around that. So you've either got more suggested, and then just adding that string, it just takes out that A note and gives you a proper G major chord. All right, if you want to hang on to that for a little bit longer. All right, so that's a nice place you can play G. Another one that you can play G, and again this is one I like to use quite a bit is if you take your first finger and cover the bottom two strings, so the A string and the D string, with your first finger on the 5th fret. So just those two there. You notice what I did there is I just put my little finger on the 7th fret of the D string for a little brief moment. That kind of gives you like a nice sort of add 9 kind of feel. Like sometimes when you play on the guitar, if you play a D chord, you might sort of do a D sus add 9. A lot of people like to do that, and again it gives you that same sort of thing. It just kind of makes it a little bit more interesting if you're playing. So you can strum that for a little bit. Just add that. Add that note in there, and it just makes it sound a bit more interesting. Okay, so you've got G down here, you got with the pinky, you got here, G, and then again you can add your 3rd finger. If you want to make it a G major, or you can do those two. So a few different places there you can play the G chord. All right. So it just enables you to vary things up a little bit, make your playing a little bit more interesting, and make things a bit more interesting for you as well. And it can also sort of change the sound sometimes. You know, sometimes I like to maybe start just with that G chord, and then I'll add in that pinky note, and it just varies it up a little bit. Okay. With the bar chords as well, useful thing to note, of course, this is the same for guitar, so guitar players will know this already, but if you play a bar chord, all you need to do to get other chords is just keep that shape and just move it up and down the frets. So you can play a D there. If I move it down 2 frets, I get a C, 2 more frets, B flat, another fret, and we're back to our A. So again, that's another useful thing you can have just to play up and down the fretboard using the bar chords. And that's something you can kind of experiment with as well. And of course, you've got the other way of playing it. More comfortable for you. Okay, so covered quite a lot so far. What I'm going to show you now, the last thing I'm going to show you, or actually the last 2 things I'm going to show you. First thing I'm going to show you is how to do a power chord. Okay, so power chords can be useful if you want to play something, a lot of chords in quick succession, or you want to have something that's got a little bit more attack to it, perhaps. And also the power chords work in, again, major or minor keys, so they're modal chords, so it's good if you're flitting between those different keys. So we'll start again with D. So for the power chord, what we're going to do is we're going to take this time we're going to take our 2nd finger, 2nd finger, I want to place that on the 7th fret, so where we played our D, there, okay. We're going to take our 3rd finger, our ring finger, I'm going to place it on the string below on the same fret, so the 7th fret of the D string. There. Okay. Then we're going to take our pinky, our small finger, and place it on the 7th fret of the high D string there. Then with our 1st finger, this can be a bit of a stretch for some people, but give it a go, we're going to place that on the A string, so the 3rd string down, on the 5th fret. So it's going to go there. Okay. So we end up with that. Okay. Alright, so that gives us our power chord. Alright, now those of you that have seen myself and Owena play before, if you've heard us or seen us play Van Diemen's Land, you'll notice that during the solo I used the power chords during the solo. So in fact that's what I was playing actually to start this video off. So that, okay? And again, like with the bar chords, the good thing about the power chords is you can keep that shape and you can just move it up and down the fretboard in different positions and get different chords. Okay, so again, we can sort of play D, and then we can move down to a C, and maybe move down to a B. If we go up 2 frets, we can get an E chord. So that can be quite useful if you want something that's got a bit more attack, or you want to move, play quite a few chords in quick succession. It's not something you'll see a lot in traditional music. It's definitely more of a kind of a rock thing. But if you've got, like we have a lot in our songs, if you've got like a fiddle solo that's a bit sort of a bit aggressive perhaps, or it's got a lot of attack on it, it can be quite nice to kind of back it with those and just give it a bit more power, a bit more attack, a bit more oomph. So it's something you can use to sort of accent the songs. So so we've got lots of different places to play our D chord, lots of different places to play our G chord, and of course we've got our A chord as well down there, or we've got the A modal. Another place you can play A, which again it's more of a suggested A than a proper A. But if we go back to where we had our G chord up here, okay, so we've got our first finger on the 4th fret of the G string, and our second finger on the 5th fret of the D string. So we've got our G there. If we move that up 2 frets to there, so now what we are on the 6th fret with our first finger, and the 7th fret with our second finger. That gives us an A. Now again, it's a suggested A, and the reason I say it's suggested is because we do have that open top D string there, which technically isn't part of the scales and part of the chord. So again, it's one of those where you don't want to be playing it for too long, because it will sound, it might sound a bit odd. It's one that you kind of want to maybe use in passing. But again, like with the G chord, we can get round it. Okay, so what we can do with the A chord there is we can add in, if we use our 3rd finger and we play the 7th fret of the D string, the very bottom string, so like that. Okay, and that gives us an A major. Okay, so that will work better, and we can probably do a little bit more with that. Okay, so that's another place you can play A major. So quite a few different places there you can play, and I say the bouzouki is quite a versatile instrument in some respects. I mean, in other respects it can be a little bit limiting. You are limited to a degree in what keys you can play in comfortably. The thing about the bouzouki, which I think is important to remember, is that it always sounds better if you can play those open strings and get that kind of nice drone underneath, because it really makes it sound a lot fuller and a lot richer, and it sort of really comes alive as an instrument if you play it like that. So I mean, these chords, they're very nice and they do work, and they can certainly add a bit of variation with the song. But I think the more you can kind of play the open chords and get those those nice open ringing strings and sort of learn how to play melodies underneath as well, the better. But certainly as a start, as a beginning, it's good to sort of know where those chords are and different places and positions you can play them in. Okay. So the very last thing I'm going to do for this lesson is I'm going to teach you one more chord. Okay, one more chord to complete our D major, and that will give you 4 chords for this lesson, and that is a B minor chord. Okay. A B minor is another nice and simple chord, so we're going to take for this one, I tend to use my 2nd finger for this, and I'll explain why in a moment. So I'm going to take my 2nd finger and put it on the 4th fret of the G string, so just there, and then with my 3rd finger I'm going to place that directly underneath it, so 4th fret of the D string. Okay, so we've got those 2 strings there. Okay, and gives us a B minor. Okay. Again, it is a suggested B minor, but this one you can kind of get away with a bit more. It's a B minor because I mean it has got the A and the D in, but I mean the D kind of works with the A's, you know, not always, but that one you can kind of get away with a bit more. But again, if you want to make it a bit more B minor sounding, what you can do, like with the power chord, is you can take your first finger and place it on the 2nd fret of the A string, so just down there. And already you can hear that it sounds a little bit darker, a little bit more kind of, you know, minor sounding, a bit gloomy. Yeah, so that gives you a... So you can play around with that, and that gives you a B minor. Okay, and that's 4 chords for the D major scale, played in lots of different positions up and down the fretboard. So just to recap, we've got E, G, A, B minor there. Okay, and as we said, lots of different positions to play those. So, I think I'll leave it there. I think now's probably a good time to stop. You guys can take that away, have a bit of a practice, play around with those different chord positions. Obviously, strumming technique is something that we can maybe cover in another lesson. So, I mean, I've just been kind of doing some sort of basic 4/4 rhythms, but of course there's lots of different rhythms you can try. So, if I do one of these again, then maybe we'll look at that. And as I say, we can also explore things like counter melodies, and you know, other nice interesting things we can do with the instrument as well. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you found it informative. I hope you found it useful, those of you that have never played before. If you want me to do another one, then please let me know in the comments. If there's anything particular you want me to cover in the lessons, then again please let me know. And yeah, your feedback will be appreciated. I've never done anything like this before, so this is the first time me doing this, so yeah, any feedback is very, very welcome. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. Thank you very much again, and hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, get practicing. See you soon. Thank you very much.